What if I told you that every act of betrayal in your relationships isn't just breaking hearts in this lifetime, but is actually creating spiritual wounds that follow your soul through eternity? But before we begin, please hit the like button and let me know where in the world you're watching from today. It's always fascinating seeing who's joining us from around the world. Most people think that when someone cheats, the damage is limited to hurt feelings, broken trust, and maybe a messy divorce. We focus on the immediate pain, the sleepless nights, the anger, and the struggle to rebuild our lives. But what if this understanding barely scratches the surface of what's really happening? What if the consequences of infidelity extend far beyond what our physical eyes can see, reaching into dimensions of existence that most of us never even consider? Edgar Cayce, America's most documented psychic who gave over 14,000 recorded readings during his lifetime, revealed something that will completely transform how you understand the true cost of betrayal. According to his documented spiritual insights, adultery doesn't just wound the heart, it creates what he called soul scars that transcend physical death and follow us through multiple incarnations. Has this ever happened to you? Have you ever wondered why some people seem to attract betrayal repeatedly, or why certain relationship patterns feel impossible to break, no matter how hard you try? Cayce's readings suggest that these aren't just psychological issues or bad luck. They might actually be spiritual wounds from past lifetimes that are still bleeding in your current existence. Think about it for a moment. If our souls are eternal, and if our actions have consequences that extend beyond this single lifetime, then doesn't it make sense that the most intimate betrayals, those that strike at the very core of trust and vulnerability, would leave marks that persist beyond physical death? Cayce discovered that when we betray someone sexually, we're not just breaking a social contract or violating their trust, we're actually damaging something much deeper, what he described as the spiritual energy field that surrounds and connects all souls. These soul scars, according to Cayce's readings, don't just disappear when we die. They become part of our spiritual DNA, influencing our capacity for love, trust, and genuine intimacy in future lifetimes. They create what he termed karmic entanglements, spiritual debts that must be repaid through experiences that teach our souls the lessons we failed to learn the first time around. Stay with me until the end, because what you're about to discover might surprise you. Cayce documented case after case where people struggling with relationship issues in their current lives were actually working through the spiritual consequences of betrayals they had either committed or experienced in previous incarnations. The businessman whose marriage was crumbling despite his material success, the woman who felt inexplicably drawn to unavailable men, the person who seemed cursed to experience betrayal in every relationship, all of these patterns had roots that extended far deeper than their current lifetime. But here's what makes this revelation even more profound. Cayce didn't just identify the problem. His readings provided detailed guidance on how these ancient spiritual wounds could be healed, how karmic debts could be resolved, and how souls could break free from destructive patterns that had been repeating for centuries. The implications are staggering. If Cayce was right, then every betrayal you've experienced, every act of infidelity that has wounded you, and yes, even every time you may have betrayed someone else, has been creating spiritual imprints that are shaping your soul's evolution in ways you never imagined. But more importantly, understanding this spiritual dimension of betrayal opens up possibilities for healing that go far beyond traditional therapy or relationship counseling. What we're about to explore together will challenge everything you thought you knew about love, betrayal, and the true nature of intimate relationships. The transformation that occurred in one of Cayce's most documented cases will fundamentally shift how you understand your own relationship patterns. A man came to Cayce in desperate confusion, watching his life crumble despite having everything that should have made him happy. Every romantic connection he formed seemed destined for betrayal. Women would leave him for other men, cheat behind his back, or simply vanish from his life without explanation. He genuinely believed he was cursed. What Cayce revealed about this man's past incarnations was nothing short of revolutionary. The reading unveiled that in ancient Egypt, this very same soul had lived as a wealthy merchant who maintained multiple wives and concubines, while systematically deceiving each woman about the others. He had used his position and resources to manipulate relationships built entirely on lies and false promises. The spiritual wound he had created through these deceptions was so profound that it had followed his soul across centuries. But here's where the hidden truth becomes even more extraordinary. The women who were betraying him in his current lifetime weren't random souls seeking to hurt him. They were the exact same souls he had deceived in Egypt, unconsciously working to restore spiritual balance by allowing him to experience the same emotional devastation he had once inflicted on them. His current suffering wasn't punishment, it was education. His soul was learning through direct experience what his past actions had created in others. This revelation completely changes how we understand the deeper mechanics behind repeated relationship patterns. When someone finds themselves attracting the same type of betrayal over and over again, or when they feel inexplicably drawn to unavailable partners, these aren't just psychological patterns or coincidences. They're often spiritual assignments that the soul has accepted in order to understand and heal ancient wounds. The journey toward healing these soul-deep injuries requires a completely different mindset than traditional relationship advice suggests. Cayce discovered that simply feeling sorry or even changing external behaviors wasn't enough to break these karmic cycles. The healing had to happen at the spiritual level through what he called active soul service. This meant the man needed to actively help and serve the very souls he had wounded, not through grand gestures, but through genuine acts of spiritual service that would restore the energetic balance his past actions had disrupted. What makes this approach so powerful is that it addresses the root cause rather than just the symptoms. When we understand that our current relationship struggles might be connected to spiritual decisions we made in previous lifetimes, we gain access to healing methods that can break patterns that have persisted for centuries. The impact of this realization extends far beyond just improving our romantic relationships. It transforms our entire understanding of personal responsibility, spiritual growth, and the interconnected nature of all human experiences. Now, I want to go even deeper into this topic and explore exactly how Cayce said these spiritual wounds could be completely healed through specific practices that anyone can use, regardless of their current spiritual beliefs or background. Write in the comments, "This makes sense to me," if you've ever felt like your relationship patterns seemed bigger than just this lifetime. The revelations behind one particular case from 1931 will completely transform your understanding of why some people seem to have everything yet still struggle with deep relationship turmoil. A highly successful businessman approached Cayce during the height of his career, completely bewildered by the collapse of his marriage. By every external measure, this man had achieved the American dream. His business empire was thriving, his financial security was unquestionable, and his social status placed him among the elite of his community. Yet his personal life was crumbling in ways that defied all logic. His wife was pulling away despite his ability to provide every material comfort she could desire. Their emotional connection had withered, intimacy had become virtually non-existent, and an invisible wall seemed to separate them no matter what external solutions he attempted. He had tried expensive vacations, lavish gifts, even therapy sessions that were considered progressive for that era. Nothing worked. The disconnect felt almost supernatural in its persistence. What Cayce uncovered during this reading fundamentally challenged everything society believed about success and happiness. The spiritual wounds this man carried from previous incarnations were so deep that no amount of material achievement could touch them. His soul was carrying the energetic imprint of betrayals he had committed in past lifetimes, and these spiritual scars were creating an invisible barrier that prevented authentic intimacy in his current marriage, regardless of his good intentions or external circumstances. This case became one of the most significant examples in Cayce's archives, because it demonstrated a hidden truth that modern society still struggles to accept: material success, social status, and even genuine desire to change cannot heal wounds that exist at the soul level. The businessman's current life prosperity was actually irrelevant to the spiritual work his soul needed to complete. His marriage crisis wasn't a failure of his current personality or efforts. It was a spiritual assignment that required a completely different approach than anything his worldly success had taught him. Among the thousands of documented readings that Cayce conducted throughout his career, patterns began emerging that revealed the intricate web of spiritual cause and effect governing human relationships. These weren't isolated incidents or random spiritual phenomena. They represented a systematic understanding of how our decisions in one lifetime create energetic ripples that influence our experiences across multiple incarnations. The evidence was overwhelming. Every action we take in intimate relationships creates spiritual patterns that echo through eternity, shaping not just our current circumstances, but our soul's entire evolutionary journey. The businessman's transformation began the moment he understood that his relationship struggles weren't about his current behavior or his wife's reactions. They were about spiritual debts that required a completely different mindset to resolve. His healing journey would ultimately involve practices that went far beyond traditional relationship counseling or self-improvement techniques. Now, I want to explore the specific spiritual mechanics that Cayce discovered about how adultery actually damages the soul's energy field, and why these wounds require such specialized healing approaches that most people never even consider. Write in the comments, "I'm ready for this truth," if you're beginning to see your own relationship patterns from this deeper perspective. The fundamental difference between what Cayce discovered and everything modern relationship experts teach will revolutionize how you approach healing from betrayal. While conventional wisdom focuses on improving communication, rebuilding trust through behavioral changes, or processing emotions through therapy, Cayce's readings revealed something far more profound happening beneath the surface. When someone commits adultery, they're not just breaking promises or hurting feelings. They're creating actual energetic imprints on their soul that function like spiritual scars, permanently altering the energy field that surrounds their consciousness. These energetic imprints operate completely independently from our conscious mind or emotional healing process. You could forgive completely, understand your partner's motivations perfectly, and even rebuild a stronger relationship than before. But if these spiritual-level wounds remain unaddressed, they continue influencing your soul's capacity for authentic intimacy across multiple lifetimes. The impact of this hidden truth means that traditional relationship advice, no matter how well-intentioned or expertly delivered, can only address surface-level symptoms, while the deeper spiritual damage continues generating the same patterns repeatedly. What makes this revelation even more extraordinary is Cayce's discovery about the spiritual contracts that souls establish before incarnating together. Reading 2671 unveiled that when two souls choose to experience life in intimate partnership, they're not just making emotional or physical commitments. They're entering into sacred agreements at the soul level that involve specific spiritual lessons both souls have agreed to learn together. These contracts transcend anything we write on paper or promise in marriage ceremonies. They're energetic bonds that connect souls across dimensions of existence. When adultery occurs, it represents a fundamental violation of these pre-incarnation agreements. The betraying soul isn't just breaking human promises, they're abandoning spiritual commitments that were made before physical birth, disrupting the entire evolutionary plan that both souls had designed for their mutual growth. This violation creates what Cayce termed karmic entanglements, which are spiritual knots that prevent both souls from progressing naturally through their intended lessons. The journey toward resolving these entanglements requires understanding that the healing must happen at the same level where the damage occurred. Since the wounds exist in the spiritual dimension, purely emotional or psychological approaches can only provide temporary relief. The transformation demands conscious awareness of these deeper spiritual mechanics and specific practices designed to cleanse the soul's energetic field. What's particularly fascinating about Cayce's findings is that these spiritual contracts often span multiple lifetimes, with souls repeatedly choosing to incarnate together until they successfully complete their shared spiritual assignments. When one soul violates the contract through betrayal, it doesn't end the spiritual connection. It actually intensifies the karmic bond, ensuring that these souls will continue encountering each other in various relationships until the lesson is finally learned. Now I want to reveal the most shocking discovery Cayce made about how these energetic cords actually form during adultery, and why they create such powerful attraction patterns that can persist for centuries, drawing souls into repeated cycles of forbidden love. Write in the comments, "This explains everything," if you're starting to understand your relationship patterns from this spiritual perspective. The mechanics behind how these energetic cords actually form during adultery will completely transform your understanding of why some attractions feel so irresistible and impossible to break. When two souls engage in intimate betrayal together, they don't just share a physical experience, they create what Cayce described as spiritual attachments that function like invisible threads, connecting their energy fields across time and space. These cords become permanent fixtures in both souls' spiritual anatomy, remaining active even after death, and continuing to influence their choices and attractions in future incarnations. What makes this discovery so profound is that these energetic connections operate completely below conscious awareness. People find themselves inexplicably drawn to certain individuals without understanding why the attraction feels so powerful and consuming. They might rationally recognize that pursuing the relationship would be destructive, yet feel compelled by forces that seem beyond their control. This isn't weakness or lack of willpower. It's the pull of ancient spiritual cords that have been strengthening across multiple lifetimes. One of Cayce's most documented cases perfectly illustrates this hidden truth in action. Reading 25:468 involved a woman who sought guidance about her overwhelming attraction to a married man who kept appearing in her life under different circumstances. No matter how hard she tried to avoid him or redirect her attention elsewhere, fate seemed determined to bring them together repeatedly. The intensity of her feelings confused and troubled her because she considered herself a moral person who would never consciously choose to interfere with someone's marriage. The reading revealed that this seemingly impossible attraction had roots extending back through 3 previous incarnations where these same two souls had been lovers, while he was married to other women. In ancient Rome, medieval England, and colonial America, they had engaged in passionate affairs that violated his marriages and created deep spiritual wounds in multiple souls. The energetic cord connecting them had grown stronger with each betrayal, creating an almost magnetic pull that transcended rational thought or moral boundaries. What shocked this woman most was discovering that what she had interpreted as true love was actually a karmic debt that needed resolution rather than fulfillment. Her soul's intense attraction wasn't leading her toward happiness. It was drawing her back into a destructive pattern that had been repeating for centuries. The journey toward freedom required recognizing that these powerful feelings were spiritual static, interfering with her ability to connect with her authentic soulmate. The transformation in her life began when she understood that breaking free from this pattern required more than just avoiding the man or suppressing her feelings. She needed to actively dissolve the energetic cord through specific spiritual practices that addressed the root cause rather than just managing the symptoms. Now, I want to explore exactly what Cayce meant by spiritual static and how these karmic entanglements prevent souls from recognizing and connecting with their true spiritual partners, keeping them trapped in cycles of unfulfilling relationships. Write in the comments, "I recognize this pattern," if you've ever felt inexplicably drawn to someone in ways that didn't make logical sense. The distinction between karmic debt and authentic spiritual love will revolutionize how you interpret your most intense romantic feelings. What Cayce discovered through his readings challenges everything popular culture teaches us about following our hearts and trusting our deepest attractions. The woman in reading 25:468 had spent years believing that her overwhelming feelings for the married man represented the purest form of love, the kind of soul-deep connection that transcends social conventions and rational boundaries. She interpreted the intensity of her emotions as proof that they were meant to be together, that their connection was somehow divinely ordained. The hidden truth Cayce revealed was far more complex and ultimately liberating. Her feelings weren't evidence of cosmic romance. They were symptoms of unresolved spiritual business that was keeping both souls trapped in destructive cycles. True spiritual love, according to Cayce's readings, creates harmony, growth, and peace in both individuals. It enhances their connection to the divine and supports their highest spiritual evolution. Karmic debt, on the other hand, creates obsession, confusion, and often leads people to violate their own moral principles and hurt innocent parties. The transformation in understanding comes when we recognize that the most compelling attractions often have nothing to do with genuine compatibility or spiritual partnership. Instead, they represent unfinished lessons that our souls are determined to complete. These karmic connections feel so powerful precisely because they carry the accumulated energy of multiple lifetimes of unresolved patterns. What makes this revelation even more profound is Cayce's discovery about spiritual static and its impact on our ability to recognize authentic love. When souls engage in adultery together, they create energetic interference that functions like radio static, scrambling the soul's natural ability to identify its true spiritual partners. This static doesn't just affect the immediate relationship, it creates ongoing confusion that can last for centuries, causing souls to consistently choose inappropriate partners while overlooking their genuine soulmates. The mechanics of this interference work by overriding the soul's natural guidance system. Under normal circumstances, souls are naturally drawn to partnerships that support their spiritual growth and evolution. They can sense when someone will challenge them in healthy ways, complement their spiritual journey, and help them become their highest selves. But when spiritual static is present, these natural instincts become clouded and unreliable. The journey toward clearing this static requires a fundamental shift in mindset about what constitutes real love versus what represents spiritual assignment. Many people spend entire lifetimes chasing relationships that feel intensely meaningful while completely missing the quiet, steady connections that would actually nurture their soul's deepest needs. The impact of understanding this distinction extends far beyond just choosing better partners. It transforms how we interpret every significant relationship experience, helping us recognize when we're being called to heal old wounds versus when we're being invited into authentic spiritual partnership. Now, I want to reveal the most shocking example from Cayce's archives about how these patterns can trap souls for centuries, creating relationship confusion that seems impossible to break until the underlying spiritual mechanics are finally understood and addressed. Write in the comments, "This changes everything," if you're beginning to see your past relationships from this karmic perspective. The case that emerged in 1938 reveals the most extraordinary example of how spiritual justice operates across lifetimes in ways that seem almost impossible to believe until you understand the deeper mechanics at work. A man approached Cayce in complete desperation, watching his life unravel in ways that defied all logic and fairness. By every measure of worldly success, he should have been living a charmed life. His business ventures were thriving, his financial portfolio was robust, and his social connections placed him among the most respected members of his community. Yet his romantic life was a series of devastating betrayals that seemed almost orchestrated by some unseen force. Every woman he genuinely cared about would eventually cheat on him, often in ways that were particularly cruel and public. Some would disappear without explanation. Others would leave him for men who were clearly inferior in terms of what he could provide, and several had betrayed him with people he considered close friends. The pattern was so consistent and so painful that he had begun to wonder if he was cursed, or if there was something fundamentally wrong with his ability to inspire loyalty and love. What Cayce uncovered during this reading completely transformed not just this man's understanding of his situation, but also provided one of the most detailed glimpses into how karmic justice operates across the vast expanse of time. The reading revealed that in ancient Egypt, this same soul had lived as an extraordinarily wealthy merchant who had used his resources and social position to create what was essentially a web of romantic deception that spanned decades. As a powerful trader with connections throughout the Mediterranean world, he had maintained not just multiple wives in different cities, but also countless concubines and mistresses, each of whom believed she held a special place in his affections. He had perfected the art of making each woman feel chosen and cherished while systematically lying about his commitments to others. His wealth allowed him to maintain separate households, provide lavish gifts that created emotional dependence, and travel between his various relationships without any of the women discovering the full extent of his deceptions. The hidden truth behind his current suffering was that every betrayal he was experiencing in 1938 was being orchestrated by the same souls he had deceived in Egypt. They weren't consciously aware of their past life connections, but their souls remembered the emotional devastation he had caused, and were unconsciously working to restore spiritual balance by allowing him to experience identical feelings of betrayal and abandonment. The transformation in his understanding began when Cayce explained that this wasn't punishment in the traditional sense, it was education. His soul had chosen to experience betrayal so that he could finally understand the true impact of his past actions and develop the capacity for genuine empathy and authentic love. Now, I want to explore exactly how these souls were unconsciously coordinating their actions across lifetimes to create this precise karmic balance, and why this process represents one of the most sophisticated systems of spiritual education ever documented. Write in the comments, "I see the pattern now," if this explanation is helping you understand seemingly unfair experiences in your own life. The coordination happening behind the scenes of this man's life reveals one of the most sophisticated systems of spiritual education ever documented. These weren't random women who happened to betray him. They were the exact same souls from ancient Egypt who had experienced his deceptions centuries earlier. What makes this discovery so extraordinary is that none of them had any conscious memory of their past life connections, yet their souls were orchestrating a precise form of karmic education that mirrored his ancient actions with stunning accuracy. The hidden mechanics of this process demonstrate how souls operate on levels far beyond our conscious awareness. Each woman was unconsciously drawn to him because their souls recognized his energy signature from Egypt. They would initially feel intense attraction and connection, just as they had in their previous incarnation, but something deeper in their spiritual memory would eventually compel them to inflict the same type of emotional devastation he had once caused them. This wasn't revenge in the petty human sense. It was a sophisticated form of spiritual teaching, designed to help his soul finally understand the true impact of betrayal. The transformation that began occurring in this man's life came when Cayce revealed that recognition of the pattern was only the first step. The reading made it clear that simply feeling sorry for his past actions, or even understanding their karmic consequences, wasn't sufficient to break the cycle. The spiritual wounds he had created in these souls required active healing through what Cayce called soul service. Specific actions designed to restore the energetic balance his deceptions had disrupted. This concept revolutionized how we understand spiritual healing from relationship wounds. Unlike emotional forgiveness, which can sometimes feel abstract or incomplete, active soul service requires concrete actions that demonstrate genuine spiritual growth and commitment to healing. The man needed to identify ways to actively help and serve these very souls in his current lifetime, not through grand gestures or attempts to win back their affection, but through authentic acts of service that would address the spiritual damage his past behavior had created. The journey toward this type of healing requires a complete shift in mindset, from seeking personal happiness to focusing on spiritual restoration. Instead of asking, "How can I stop attracting betrayal?" the question becomes, "How can I actively heal the wounds my soul has created?" This approach transforms victims into active participants in their own spiritual evolution and the healing of others. What makes this process so powerful is that it addresses the root spiritual cause rather than just managing the emotional symptoms. When someone commits to actively serving the souls they have wounded, they begin dissolving the karmic debt at its source, which naturally reduces the magnetic pull that keeps drawing these destructive patterns into their life. Now, I want to explore the specific spiritual mechanics that Cayce discovered about how sexual betrayal actually violates what he called the creative force itself, and why this makes adultery uniquely damaging to the soul's connection with divine energy. Write in the comments, "I'm ready to heal," if you're beginning to see your own relationship challenges as opportunities for active spiritual service. The deeper spiritual mechanics that Cayce uncovered about sexual betrayal will fundamentally change how you understand the sacred nature of intimate relationships and why adultery creates such profound spiritual damage. What most people don't realize is that sexual energy isn't just a biological drive or emotional expression. It's actually the physical manifestation of the same creative force that connects our souls directly to divine source energy. When we engage in intimate relationships, we're not just sharing bodies or emotions, we're participating in a sacred creative process that mirrors the divine creative principle itself. This revelation transforms our entire understanding of why sexual betrayal feels so devastating on levels that go far beyond hurt feelings or broken trust. When someone violates this sacred creative force through deception and adultery, they're not just hurting their partner, they're actually disrupting their own connection to the divine creative energy that flows through all intimate expression. The impact of this disruption extends far beyond the immediate relationship and begins affecting the soul's ability to access higher spiritual states and authentic creative power. What Cayce discovered through reading 26289 was that sexual energy serves as a direct conduit between our physical existence and our spiritual source. When this energy is used authentically, within the context of genuine spiritual partnership, it actually enhances both souls' connection to divine wisdom and creative inspiration. But when it's corrupted through deception and betrayal, it creates what he termed spiritual congestion, a kind of energetic blockage that prevents the soul from accessing its natural spiritual abilities. This spiritual congestion functions like a clogged artery in the soul's energy system. Instead of creative force flowing freely between the physical and spiritual dimensions, the energy becomes stagnant and distorted. People experiencing this congestion often report feeling spiritually empty, creatively blocked, or unable to connect with the sense of purpose and meaning that once guided their lives. They might achieve external success but feel internally disconnected from any deeper source of fulfillment or inspiration. The hidden truth behind this phenomenon is that sexual energy carries such powerful creative potential precisely because it's designed to be a bridge between earthly existence and divine consciousness. When we misuse this sacred energy through betrayal, we're essentially corrupting the very mechanism that allows our souls to maintain their connection with higher spiritual realms. The transformation that occurs when someone begins to understand this sacred dimension of sexuality completely revolutionizes their approach to intimate relationships. Instead of seeing sex as primarily physical pleasure or emotional bonding, they begin to recognize it as a spiritual practice that either enhances or diminishes their soul's evolutionary progress. The journey toward clearing spiritual congestion requires more than just changing external behaviors or feeling remorseful about past actions. It demands a fundamental shift in mindset about the sacred responsibility that comes with accessing such powerful creative energy. Now, I want to explore the most shocking consequence that Cayce discovered about souls who habitually misuse this creative force across multiple lifetimes, and how some souls can actually lose their ability to experience genuine love entirely. Write in the comments, "This is sacred," if you're beginning to understand intimate relationships from this spiritual perspective. The most devastating consequence that Cayce discovered about repeated sexual betrayal will shock you with its implications for the soul's long-term evolution. When souls habitually engage in adultery across multiple lifetimes, they don't just accumulate karmic debt or create spiritual congestion, they actually begin to lose their fundamental capacity to experience genuine love. This isn't temporary emotional numbing that can be healed through therapy or time. It's a progressive, spiritual hardening that can take entire incarnations to reverse, leaving souls trapped in a kind of emotional wasteland where they can observe love but never truly feel it. The hidden truth behind this phenomenon is that love operates like a spiritual muscle that grows stronger with authentic use, but atrophies when consistently corrupted through manipulation and deception. Each time a soul chooses betrayal over authenticity, they damage their own love-generating capacity. Eventually, after enough lifetimes of choosing manipulation over genuine connection, the soul's ability to produce authentic emotional resonance becomes so damaged that they essentially forget how to love. This spiritual amnesia creates one of the most tragic situations Cayce encountered in his readings. In 1944, a woman approached him because she felt completely emotionally numb in all her relationships. She could perform the behaviors associated with love, say the right words, and even intellectually understand what love should feel like, but she experienced no actual emotional connection. She described feeling like she was watching her own life from behind glass, unable to truly participate in the emotional experiences that seemed to come naturally to everyone around her. The reading that followed revealed one of the most extensive patterns of spiritual damage Cayce had ever documented. This woman's soul had spent 7 consecutive lifetimes using her sexuality as a tool for manipulation and control. In ancient Greece, medieval France, Renaissance Italy, colonial America, and other incarnations, she had perfected the art of creating false emotional connections to achieve personal gain, leaving behind countless broken hearts and shattered trust. The transformation in understanding came when Cayce explained that her current emotional numbness wasn't a punishment, it was actually a form of spiritual protection. Her soul had essentially shut down its emotional centers to prevent her from creating even more karmic damage while in this spiritually compromised state. She needed to spend this entire lifetime learning to approach relationships with genuine care and authentic intention before her soul's love-generating capacity could be safely restored. The journey toward healing this level of spiritual damage requires decisions that most people never consider. It involves dedicating entire incarnations to learning the most basic principles of authentic emotional connection, often starting from a place of complete emotional isolation, and slowly, carefully rebuilding the soul's capacity for genuine feeling. Now, I want to explore the specific spiritual practices that Cayce revealed for healing these ancient wounds, and how souls can begin to restore their natural capacity for authentic love even after lifetimes of spiritual damage. Write in the comments, "I want to heal deeply," if you recognize patterns of emotional disconnect in your own relationship experiences. The spiritual protection mechanism that had shut down this woman's emotional capacity reveals one of the most sophisticated safety systems operating within the soul's architecture. Her higher self had essentially created an emotional firewall, blocking her ability to generate authentic feelings until she could develop the spiritual maturity to use those emotions responsibly. This wasn't cruelty or permanent damage, it was her soul's wisdom preventing her from accumulating even more karmic debt. While she learned the fundamental principles of genuine care and authentic connection. What makes this discovery so profound is that it completely transforms how we understand emotional healing and spiritual recovery. The numbness wasn't something to be quickly fixed or medicated away. It was a necessary stage in her soul's rehabilitation process. Her emotional centers would only reopen when she had demonstrated consistent patterns of selfless service and genuine concern for others' well-being, proving that she could be trusted with the powerful creative force of authentic love. This connects to one of Cayce's most revolutionary discoveries about the nature of spiritual healing itself. Unlike physical wounds that naturally mend through the body's automatic repair systems, spiritual wounds from betrayal require conscious, active participation in specific healing practices. Time alone never heals these deeper injuries. They can persist for centuries without any improvement unless the soul engages in deliberate spiritual cleansing designed to remove the energetic imprints that betrayal creates. The transformation begins when we understand that spiritual wounds don't operate according to the same principles as emotional or physical trauma. You can't just wait them out, talk them through, or hope they'll fade with enough distance from the original injury. These wounds exist in the energetic dimension of the soul and must be addressed using spiritual technologies specifically designed to cleanse and restore the soul's natural energetic flow. The journey toward active soul cleansing requires a fundamental shift in mindset from passive healing to conscious spiritual work. Instead of asking, "When will this pain go away?" The question becomes, what specific practices can I engage in to actively dissolve the spiritual imprints that are keeping these patterns active in my life? This approach transforms the healing process from something that happens to you into something you actively participate in creating. The hidden truth behind why spiritual wounds require such active intervention is that they're composed of conscious energy that was created through conscious choices. Since the damage was created through deliberate actions, it can only be undone through equally deliberate spiritual practices that directly address the energetic distortions at their source. Now, I want to reveal the exact three-stage process that Cayce outlined for completely cleansing the soul of betrayal wounds, including the specific practices he recommended for each stage, and why this systematic approach can break karmic patterns that have persisted for lifetimes. Write in the comments, "I choose active healing," if you're ready to move beyond passive waiting and engage in conscious spiritual work. The systematic approach that Cayce outlined in reading 34131 represents one of the most comprehensive spiritual healing processes ever documented, addressing betrayal wounds at their deepest energetic levels. The first stage involves what Cayce called genuine confession, but this goes far beyond simply admitting wrongdoing to the people we've hurt. This confession must be directed toward the universal creative force itself, acknowledging that our betrayals have violated not just human trust, but the sacred creative energy that flows through all intimate connections. This level of confession requires a fundamental shift in understanding about who we're ultimately accountable to when we engage in sexual betrayal. We're not just answering to our partners or even to our own conscience. We're acknowledging that we've misused divine creative energy and seeking forgiveness from the source of that energy itself. The transformation that occurs during genuine confession happens when we finally recognize the cosmic significance of our actions and take full responsibility for the spiritual damage we've created. The second stage involves a deliberate period of celibacy that serves a purpose most people completely misunderstand. This isn't about punishment or deprivation. It's about redirecting the powerful sexual creative energy away from destructive patterns and towards spiritual development. During this period, the same energy that was being used for manipulation and betrayal gets channeled into meditation, service, and conscious spiritual growth. The hidden truth behind why this celibacy period is so crucial is that sexual energy operates like a river that needs to be temporarily dammed and redirected before it can flow in healthier directions. Without this conscious redirection, the old patterns remain too strong, and the soul will inevitably fall back into the same destructive choices that created the original wounds. The third stage requires active service specifically focused on helping others who have been wounded by betrayal. This isn't general volunteer work or random acts of kindness. It's targeted spiritual service designed to heal the exact type of damage your own actions have created in the world. The journey toward complete healing requires actively contributing to the restoration of trust and authentic love in others' lives. What makes this process so revolutionary is Cayce's revelation that sexual intimacy itself must be completely reconceptualized as a spiritual practice, rather than merely physical pleasure or ego gratification. True healing occurs when we finally understand that sexual connection is meant to be a form of prayer, a sacred communion between souls that enhances both partners' connection to divine creative force. The transformation in mindset required for this level of healing challenges everything modern culture teaches about sexuality and relationships. Instead of seeing intimate connection as primarily about personal satisfaction or emotional bonding, we begin to approach it as a sacred responsibility that either contributes to or detracts from the spiritual evolution of everyone involved. Now, I want to explore how this understanding of sexual intimacy as spiritual practice connects to Cayce's broader teachings about marriage as a spiritual assignment and why souls choose to incarnate together for purposes that extend far beyond companionship or personal happiness. Write in the comments, "I understand the sacred responsibility," if you're beginning to see intimate relationships as spiritual assignments, rather than just personal experiences. The revolutionary understanding that emerges from Cayce's teachings about marriage will completely transform how you interpret every relationship challenge you've ever experienced. What most people believe about why souls choose to marry is based on romantic ideals of finding happiness, companionship, or emotional fulfillment. But Cayce's readings revealed that souls actually select their marriage partners before incarnating, specifically choosing relationships that will provide the exact spiritual lessons and growth opportunities their souls need for evolution. This means that when someone commits adultery, they're not just betraying their spouse's trust, they're actually abandoning a spiritual assignment that was carefully planned before birth. The hidden truth behind this revelation is that every marriage represents a sacred contract between souls who have agreed to help each other transcend specific spiritual limitations and develop particular aspects of divine love. When one partner chooses betrayal over spiritual growth, they're essentially refusing to complete the spiritual work they committed to before incarnating. The profound implications of this understanding became crystal clear in one of Cayce's most documented cases from 1942. A couple approached him after the husband's affair had nearly destroyed their marriage. The wife was devastated and wanted to leave, but something inexplicable kept drawing her back despite the pain. She couldn't understand why she felt so magnetically connected to someone who had hurt her so deeply, or why the thought of permanently separating felt like it would damage something essential in her soul. The reading that followed revealed one of the most extraordinary examples of long-term soul partnerships ever documented. These two souls had been working together for over 1,000 years, incarnating in various relationships across multiple lifetimes, all focused on overcoming the same fundamental spiritual challenges: patterns of jealousy, possessiveness, and the need to control love rather than trust in its natural flow. The transformation in understanding came when Cayce revealed that the husband's affair wasn't just a moment of weakness or moral failure. It was actually a crucial spiritual test that would either destroy their soul connection forever or finally provide the catalyst they needed to transcend the possessive patterns that had sabotaged their love for centuries. The betrayal was forcing both souls to confront their deepest fears about love, trust, and surrender in ways that a comfortable, unchallenged relationship never could. The journey toward healing this ancient pattern required both souls to make decisions that went far beyond typical marriage counseling or relationship repair. They needed to understand that their personal happiness was secondary to their spiritual evolution, and that working through this betrayal with genuine forgiveness and wisdom could finally free them from karmic patterns that had been repeating for lifetimes. Now, I want to explore the specific practices that Cayce gave this couple for healing their soul connection, and how understanding betrayal as a spiritual test rather than just personal injury can transform the entire healing process. Write in the comments, "We chose this lesson," if you're beginning to see your relationship challenges as spiritual assignments rather than random difficulties. The critical crossroads that this couple faced represents one of the most significant spiritual decisions any soul can encounter during an incarnation. Cayce's reading revealed that they stood at a precise moment where their choices would determine not just the fate of their current marriage, but the entire trajectory of their soul's evolution for potentially hundreds of years to come. They could either allow the betrayal to destroy their connection forever, relegating them to repeat the same jealousy and possessiveness patterns in future lifetimes, or they could use this crisis as the catalyst to finally transcend these ancient limitations once and for all. The transformation required understanding that their personal pain, while completely valid, was actually secondary to the larger spiritual assignment they had accepted. The betrayal wasn't happening to them, it was happening for them, as a precisely designed spiritual curriculum that would force both souls to confront their deepest fears and limitations in ways that comfortable circumstances never could. This shift in perspective doesn't minimize the hurt or excuse the betrayal, but it provides a framework for healing that extends far beyond mere emotional recovery. What Cayce revealed about true forgiveness revolutionizes everything we think we know about healing from betrayal. Most people assume forgiveness means forgetting what happened, pretending the hurt wasn't real, or somehow forcing themselves to feel okay about being betrayed. But spiritual forgiveness operates on a completely different level. It's about recognizing that the betrayal, however painful, was part of a larger spiritual lesson that both souls had agreed to experience before incarnating. This level of understanding requires a fundamental mindset shift from seeing yourself as a victim of someone else's choices to recognizing yourself as a soul who chose to experience this particular form of spiritual education. The hidden truth behind this perspective is that it transforms the entire healing process from something that focuses on what was done to you into something that focuses on what you're being called to learn and become through the experience. The journey toward this type of spiritual forgiveness doesn't happen overnight, and it doesn't require staying in harmful relationships or enabling destructive behavior. Instead, it creates space for genuine healing that addresses the root spiritual causes rather than just managing the emotional symptoms. When we can see betrayal as part of our soul's curriculum rather than just personal injury, we gain access to healing resources that operate far beyond the limitations of human psychology. The couple's path forward required specific spiritual practices that would help them learn to love without possessiveness, trust without naivety, and commit without controlling. These weren't just relationship skills, they were fundamental spiritual capacities that would serve their soul's evolution for lifetimes to come. Now I want to explore the exact meditation and prayer practices that Cayce gave this couple for healing their ancient soul wounds, and how these techniques can help anyone break free from possessive love patterns that have been repeating across incarnations. Write in the comments, "I choose spiritual understanding," if you're ready to see your relationship challenges as opportunities for soul growth, rather than just personal pain. The profound wisdom that Cayce revealed about spiritual growth sometimes requiring separation challenges our deepest assumptions about what healing from betrayal should look like. Not every soul partnership is meant to be healed through staying together and working things out. Sometimes the greatest act of love and spiritual maturity is recognizing when souls need to separate so they can each focus on their individual spiritual development without the complications and triggers that their shared history creates. This doesn't mean that separation represents failure or that the spiritual lessons are abandoned. The healing still requires understanding the deeper spiritual significance of what occurred, regardless of whether the relationship continues. The transformation happens when both souls can honor their connection while releasing their attachment to specific outcomes, allowing divine wisdom to guide whether their paths should continue together or apart. One of the most powerful examples of this principle emerged in reading 14:7-21, where a woman approached Cayce completely devastated by her husband's decision to leave her for another woman. She felt utterly abandoned and betrayed, unable to understand how someone she had loved so deeply could cause her such profound pain. Her entire identity had been built around being a devoted wife, and his departure left her feeling not just heartbroken, but fundamentally lost about who she was without that role. What Cayce uncovered about her situation revealed the hidden opportunity concealed within her devastating experience. The reading explained that her husband's betrayal and departure was actually presenting her with the greatest spiritual gift she could receive, the chance to finally learn about unconditional love. For years, her love had been deeply conditional, based on his behavior, his attention, and his ability to meet her emotional needs. She had been unconsciously using emotional manipulation to control his choices and ensure his devotion. The journey toward authentic spiritual growth required her to confront these manipulation patterns that she had perfected across multiple lifetimes. Her soul had become so skilled at emotional control that she genuinely believed her possessive behaviors represented pure love. The betrayal forced her to examine the difference between loving someone and needing to control someone, between caring for their well-being and managing their choices to ensure her own security. The transformation that began occurring in her life when she understood this deeper spiritual purpose was nothing short of miraculous. Instead of focusing on getting her husband back or proving that he was wrong to leave, she began developing the capacity to love him spiritually while releasing all attachment to his decisions. This didn't mean she had to stay married to him or approve of his choices, but it meant she could wish for his highest spiritual good regardless of how his journey affected her personally. Now, I want to explore the most shocking revelation that Cayce made about how souls actually choose to experience betrayal before incarnating as a way to accelerate their spiritual development, and why understanding this pre-incarnation choice can completely transform the healing process. Write in the comments, "I choose to grow individually," if you're beginning to see separation and independence as potential paths to spiritual development rather than just relationship failure. The deeper spiritual mechanics behind the husband's affair reveal one of the most complex aspects of soul relationships that most people never consider. While his betrayal was morally wrong and caused tremendous pain, Cayce's reading uncovered that it was also functioning as a form of spiritual rebellion against his wife's attempts to control his soul's evolution. Her unconscious manipulation patterns had become so sophisticated that they were actually interfering with his spiritual development, creating energetic resistance that eventually manifested as his affair. This revelation doesn't excuse his destructive choices or minimize the harm they caused, but it illuminates the hidden spiritual dynamics that were operating beneath the surface of their relationship. The husband's soul was essentially fighting for its freedom from patterns of control that had been operating between them for lifetimes. His betrayal represented a misguided attempt to break free from spiritual bondage, though he chose a method that created far more karmic complications than it resolved. The transformation in understanding becomes even more profound when Cayce revealed the most shocking truth about this woman's experience. Her soul had actually chosen to experience this particular betrayal before incarnating, specifically selecting this painful curriculum as the most effective way to learn about releasing control and trusting in divine love. This wasn't random suffering or cosmic injustice. It was a precisely designed spiritual assignment that her higher self had accepted as necessary for her soul's evolution. The hidden truth behind pre-incarnation soul choices completely revolutionizes how we understand personal responsibility and spiritual victimhood. Before birth, this woman's soul had reviewed multiple potential life paths and deliberately selected the scenario that included this devastating betrayal, because her spiritual guides had determined that only through experiencing such profound loss of control could she finally learn to surrender her need to manage everyone else's spiritual journey. The journey toward accepting this level of spiritual responsibility requires a fundamental shift in mindset that challenges everything modern psychology teaches about healing from trauma. Instead of seeing herself as an innocent victim of her husband's selfish choices, she needed to recognize herself as a soul who had courageously chosen to experience this particular form of spiritual education, knowing it would be painful, but also knowing it was necessary for her evolution. The implications of understanding pre-incarnation choices extend far beyond this single case. It suggests that many of our most painful relationship experiences might actually be spiritual assignments we accepted before birth, designed to teach us specific lessons that couldn't be learned through easier circumstances. This doesn't mean we should seek out betrayal or stay in harmful relationships, but it does mean we can approach our deepest wounds as opportunities for accelerated spiritual growth. Now, I want to explore how recognizing our role in choosing these difficult experiences can completely transform the healing process, and why this understanding represents one of the most powerful tools for breaking free from ancient karmic patterns. Write in the comments, "My soul chose this growth," if you're ready to consider that your deepest challenges might be spiritual assignments you accepted before birth. The power of recognizing pre-incarnation spiritual assignments becomes even more evident when we examine how ancient wounds from previous lifetimes can create seemingly irrational emotional responses in our current relationships. One of Cayce's most illuminating cases involved a young woman in 1936 who sought guidance about her overwhelming jealousy that was destroying her otherwise healthy relationship. Despite having a loving, faithful boyfriend who had never given her reason to distrust him, she experienced intense panic whenever he spoke to other women or spent time away from her. The hidden truth behind her emotional reactions had nothing to do with her current circumstances. and everything to do with spiritual wounds that had been festering for centuries. Cayce's reading revealed that in medieval France, this same soul had been married to a nobleman who maintained multiple mistresses while publicly humiliating her for her inability to bear children. The betrayal wasn't just private pain, it was public shame that destroyed her social standing and left her completely powerless in a society that offered women no protection or recourse. The transformation in understanding came when Cayce explained that her current jealousy wasn't really about her boyfriend's behavior. It was her soul's ancient wound being triggered by any situation that remotely resembled the powerlessness she had experienced in France. Her emotional reactions were completely disproportionate to present circumstances because they were responding to past life trauma that her conscious mind couldn't even remember. What makes this discovery so profound is that it reveals how souls can spend lifetimes being controlled by ancient wounds that have nothing to do with their current reality. The boyfriend was being punished for crimes committed by a completely different soul in a completely different century, while she was trapped in emotional patterns that prevented her from enjoying the genuine love that was actually available to her. The journey toward healing these ancient wounds requires developing the ability to recognize when our emotional reactions are disproportionate to present circumstances. When we find ourselves responding with intensity that doesn't match the actual situation, it's often a sign that we're dealing with spiritual wounds from previous incarnations that are bleeding through into our current experience. The remarkable discovery that Cayce made is that we don't need to consciously remember past life experiences to heal from them. Our current relationships actually provide the perfect laboratory for working with these ancient wounds, allowing us to practice new responses and gradually dissolve the energetic imprints that have been creating destructive patterns for lifetimes. Now, I want to explore the specific soul-healing meditation technique that Cayce taught for accessing and healing these forgotten wounds, and how this practice can free us from emotional patterns that have been sabotaging our relationships across multiple incarnations. Write in the comments, "I'm healing ancient wounds," if you recognize emotional patterns in your life that seem bigger than your current circumstances would warrant. The specific soul-healing meditation technique that Cayce revealed represents one of the most powerful methods ever documented for accessing and healing wounds that exist beyond conscious memory. When the jealous woman asked how she could possibly heal from betrayal that had happened in a past life, she couldn't even remember. Cayce's response opened up entirely new possibilities for spiritual healing that transcend the limitations of traditional therapy or psychological approaches. The technique begins with what Cayce called quiet contemplation, where the person enters a meditative state and directly asks their higher self to reveal the spiritual lessons hidden within their emotional reactions. This isn't about trying to remember specific past life details or visualizing ancient scenarios. Instead, it's about accessing the soul's deeper wisdom that understands exactly what healing needs to occur and how to facilitate that process. The transformation happens when we learn to communicate directly with the part of ourselves that remembers everything, even when our conscious mind has no access to those memories. The soul carries complete records of all our experiences across lifetimes, and through this meditation practice, we can receive guidance about how to heal ancient wounds without needing to consciously relive traumatic experiences. The second part of the practice involves sending love and forgiveness to the souls who betrayed us in past lives, understanding that their actions were part of a larger spiritual drama that both souls had agreed to experience. This step requires a profound shift in mindset from seeking justice or vindication to seeking understanding and spiritual resolution. The results that followed this woman's commitment to Cayce's guidance were nothing short of miraculous. Within 6 months of practicing this soul-healing meditation daily, her patterns of jealousy had completely disappeared. The transformation wasn't gradual or partial, it was total and permanent. More importantly, her capacity for trust had evolved from fearful vigilance to genuine spiritual confidence in divine love's protection. The hidden truth behind this rapid healing is that once we address wounds at their spiritual source, the emotional and psychological symptoms often resolve automatically. She didn't need years of therapy to understand her jealousy or complex behavioral strategies to manage her reactions. By healing the ancient spiritual wound, all the surface manifestations simply dissolved. The journey toward this level of transformation requires trusting that our souls possess wisdom far beyond what our conscious minds can access, and that healing can occur through spiritual means that bypass the need for conscious understanding or emotional processing. Now I want to explore the broader implications of what happens when souls learn to heal betrayal through spiritual understanding rather than emotional reaction, and how this process can actually accelerate spiritual evolution in ways that would normally take lifetimes to achieve. Write in the comments, "I trust my soul's wisdom," if you're ready to access healing that goes beyond what your conscious mind can understand. The concept of betrayal as a spiritual gift challenges everything we believe about victimhood and personal responsibility in relationships. Reading 5011 presented one of Cayce's most complex cases, involving a man who had discovered his wife's long-term affair and felt completely devastated by what he perceived as the ultimate betrayal of trust. He had been a devoted husband, working tirelessly to provide for his family, yet his wife had been carrying on an intimate relationship with another man for years. What Cayce revealed about this situation completely transformed the man's understanding of his role in creating the circumstances he was experiencing. The reading explained that this devastating discovery was actually a spiritual gift that would force him to examine patterns of emotional unavailability that had been sabotaging his relationships for lifetimes. Despite his external devotion and material provision, his soul had been emotionally absent from his partnerships, leaving his wives feeling spiritually abandoned even while being physically cared for. The hidden truth behind his wife's affair was that it reflected back to him the same emotional abandonment he had inflicted on partners in multiple past incarnations. While he focused on her betrayal, Cayce encouraged him to recognize how his own emotional unavailability had created the spiritual vacuum that drew her to seek connection elsewhere. This didn't excuse her deception, but it revealed the deeper spiritual dynamics that had created the conditions for betrayal to occur. The transformation in understanding became even more profound when Cayce revealed the most shocking aspect of this karmic triangle. The man his wife was having an affair with wasn't a random soul who had entered their lives by chance. He was actually a soul who had been the husband's abandoned partner in a previous lifetime. The three of them were unconsciously working out an ancient karmic pattern where the current husband had emotionally abandoned his past life partner, who was now the affair partner, while the current wife was experiencing the same abandonment the husband had inflicted centuries earlier. The journey toward resolving this ancient triangle required all three souls to develop capabilities they had been avoiding for lifetimes. The husband needed to learn genuine emotional presence and spiritual intimacy rather than just external provision. The wife needed to learn honest communication and authentic connection rather than seeking fulfillment through deception. The affair partner needed to learn respect for spiritual contracts rather than pursuing satisfaction that violated others' commitments. The implications of this case reveal how betrayal often involves not just two people, but entire networks of souls working to balance ancient spiritual debts and learn lessons that have been postponed across multiple incarnations. Now, I want to explore how understanding these complex soul relationships can transform our approach to forgiveness, and why Cayce believed that working through betrayal with spiritual wisdom could accelerate evolution in ways that would normally require centuries to achieve. Write in the comments, "I see the deeper pattern," if you're beginning to understand how your relationship challenges might involve ancient soul connections that extend far beyond your current lifetime. The extraordinary transformation that occurs when souls learn to heal from betrayal without becoming bitter or closed-hearted represents one of the most accelerated paths to spiritual evolution that Cayce ever documented. These souls develop what he called spiritual immunity, a kind of energetic protection that makes them independent of others' actions and choices. They no longer need others to behave in certain ways for them to feel secure, loved, or spiritually fulfilled, because they've discovered an internal connection to divine love that remains constant regardless of external circumstances. This spiritual immunity doesn't mean becoming emotionally numb or detached from relationships. Instead, it creates a foundation of inner strength that allows them to love deeply while remaining unshaken by betrayal, abandonment, or rejection. The hidden truth behind this immunity is that it can only be developed through successfully navigating profound betrayal with spiritual understanding rather than emotional reaction. Souls who achieve this level of spiritual mastery often become powerful healers for others who are struggling with similar challenges. The impact of their transformation extends far beyond their personal healing. These souls naturally become magnets for others who are working through relationship trauma, because their energy field carries the wisdom and strength that comes from having successfully navigated the deepest forms of spiritual wounding. They don't just offer advice or sympathy. They embody the possibility of healing in ways that inspire others to transcend victimhood and discover their own spiritual resilience. What makes this development even more profound is Cayce's revelation about how these healed souls are actually pioneering new forms of relationship that will become the norm in future incarnations. They're developing capacities for spiritual partnership that transcend the possessive, fear-based patterns that have dominated human relationships for millennia. These evolved souls learn to love without ownership, trust without naivety, and commit without controlling. The journey toward this level of relationship mastery represents humanity's collective evolution toward more authentic ways of connecting with each other and with divine love itself. Souls who can heal from betrayal with spiritual understanding are essentially writing the blueprint for how future generations will approach intimate relationships, marriage, and spiritual partnership. Their relationships become laboratories for testing new possibilities, partnerships based on mutual spiritual growth rather than emotional dependency, love that enhances rather than limits individual freedom, and commitment that serves soul's evolution rather than ego satisfaction. These pioneer souls are proving that it's possible to experience profound intimacy without possessiveness and deep commitment without control. Now, I want to explore how Cayce believed these evolved relationships represent humanity's preparation for a completely new era of spiritual consciousness, and why the increase in relationship challenges we're seeing today is actually evidence of our species' preparation for this evolutionary leap. Write in the comments, "I'm pioneering new love," if you feel called to develop relationships based on spiritual partnership rather than emotional dependency. The understanding that emerges from Cayce's teachings about adultery and spiritual evolution offers us a completely new framework for approaching the deepest challenges in our relationships. When we can see betrayal as spiritual assignment rather than just personal tragedy, we gain access to healing possibilities that most people never even consider. These aren't just intellectual concepts, they're practical tools for transforming our most painful experiences into catalysts for genuine spiritual growth. If you've stayed with me through this entire exploration, you're clearly someone who recognizes that there are deeper dimensions to relationship challenges than what appears on the surface. The fact that you're seeking this level of understanding suggests your soul is ready for the kind of advanced spiritual work that can break patterns spanning multiple lifetimes. I'd love for you to subscribe to this channel because we consistently dive into these profound spiritual teachings that can actually change your life, rather than just giving you something interesting to think about. Edgar Cayce left us thousands of readings that contain wisdom most people will never encounter, and I'm committed to sharing these insights in ways that make them practical and accessible for modern spiritual seekers. Leave a comment saying, "This message was meant for me," if you made it all the way to the end. I always read every comment and love connecting with people who are serious about this level of spiritual growth. Your engagement means everything because it helps me know these teachings are reaching the souls who are ready for them. If this content resonated with you, that like button would mean the world to me. We've created something meaningful together over these past minutes, and your support helps ensure more people can access these life-changing insights from one of America's most documented spiritual teachers. There's a video right here that explores Cayce's teachings about how to recognize your true soulmate versus karmic relationships that keep you trapped in destructive patterns. Click and continue with me over there. It's the perfect next step in understanding how to create the kind of spiritually evolved relationships we've been discussing.